m'en fous les recettes de Charlotte. On va en faire une là. On va essayer sa salade César.
Les gens me contactent moi pour me dire that they're cooking Charlotte's food.
I'll show you some of our main. This is one of our main tools, the lens. I can see your eye, big as a globe. Oh.
Hello, nomads. We're meeting with Parafilms. So based in Montreal, Parafilms led by Sharif, Mirshak, and Sardet, direct documentary, educational, artistic work that have brought them to collaborate with, look, the BBC, Nat Geo, TED, the CBC, just to name a few. So most of their projects involve expedition filmmaking, science communication, and outreach. They explore human stories and magnify mysteries of nature. I love their work. I've really enjoyed watching them develop since their early days working together. In fact, they were members here at our coworking for about 7 years, so it was quite the heartbreak when they left. And reminded me that they were our very first co-working member at NOMAD. I don't even know how long ago now, like 11 or 12 years ago. So there's plenty to catch up on. Welcome to NOMAD, gentlemen. You are live.
Hey.
Thank you for having us, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
No way. Where are you from, and how did you start doing what you do?
So I was actually born in south of France, near the Italian border, on the French Riviera, in the hills, little village. Was born in a tiny little village, kind of Provençal, and I had a very interesting, kind of uprising with a lot of surrounded by nature, the mountains, the Mediterranean, and mostly I was in an alternative school that was kind of immersed in nature. So a lot of contacts with the wild every day, and trying very creative school that kind of sprung some ideas in our heads that, not conventional learning, but more like, learning stuff like poetry and drawing and painting.
And your father's actually, is he a scientist or
Yeah, my father is a biologist, and he's a biochemist. So he did a lot of research about cell development and the early stages of life, basically studying life at its first kind of steps in biology.
That must have influenced your work right from the start.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I was very much inspired by biology in general, but also the ocean. Being close to the sea and being in labs really influenced some of my passions, for sure. I have this vivid memory of going fishing for plankton when I was maybe 5 years old with my dad. And that kind of stuck, it's like this immense world that opened up to me and that I've been exploring since.
And Sharif, where are you from, young man?
You can go back.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, you guys are good, eh?
Keeping
the social distance.
Yeah.
So where are you from, buddy?
I'm born in Montreal, and I grew up here. And I guess.
How did you get into filmmaking, and how did the link between filmmaking and nature form for you?
I was the type of student who was good in school, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do until I was maybe 19 or 20, which is when I was in a business school on a grant, and I just realized I could never continue in business. I clicked, so I got into Concordia Communications, which changed my life. Probably the best school years in my life, and that's where I got into filmmaking and media theory. But I didn't work in it until I was maybe 27 or 28, when a guy called Jason Rohde had a calling to do films, minute moments.
Don't give me too much credit, Sharif.
How
did you two start working together?
Well, that's it. Just before doing that film with you, around 2008, Noé and I had met through a friend. He was here to make a documentary about the cultural scene in Montreal. He came from France. And a friend of mine was supposed to do the music for the doc. So that's how we met. And yeah, we're both nature lovers and divers, and that's how we connected. Yeah, it's like I knew him all my life when we met, because I had just come back from Thailand and Malaysia, and I was doing a lot of underwater photography, and I had decided to stop looking for a job and kind of create my own job. So doing a lot of photography, because the cameras were evolving so much around that time. And I think that's what led a lot to the beginning of Parafilms, is the evolution of technology and the access that we had to certain cameras, such as the P2 and the 5D Mark II. So I think that's what really, we had the tools to make films and make artistic and commercial work, and that's how it started.
You've given me an amazing selection of videos that really fit perfectly with our whole slow TV approach that we've been meaning to take for years, but really just needed this great shutdown to give us the kick in the butt we needed to actually slow down, strangely enough. And so I've been watching a lot of it. It just, the timing was perfect with Earth Day, actually, because that's something quite special that you guys are out there. You're real explorers. You're filming things that other people have never seen before in some cases.
It's incredible because we're surrounded with life that we can't perceive. So I think on a sonic level, we're limited from 20 to 20,000 hertz. On a visual level, we only see a certain spectrum, and that applies also to size and morphology. So we're surrounded with bacteria and viruses that we can't see, and that are in our everyday environment. And in the ocean, it's incredible the importance that plankton plays. So plankton goes from viruses, bacteria, all the way to the largest organisms, which are siphonophores. So you have a wide variety of teeming with life. The ocean is teeming with life that you often can't see. And it, like you're saying, it plays such a crucial role in the production of oxygen, and it also creates fossil fuels. When plankton dies, it sediments to the seafloor, and a billion years later, you have fossil fuels, you have oil. So it's incredible, all of the implications, of course, and it's the base of the food chain. It feeds all the fish, all the mammals. So
what are you showing us, Noé?
Showing a few samples of the photography work that we've done along the years with plankton, and just the great diversity of you know, shapes and forms. And these are some alien-like plankton, like amazing creatures that you can see, and it's different every time we do we collect plankton and we photograph it. It changes every single time. So it's this kind of infinite world to explore. And these photos were taken in a lab environment. So it's almost like we create a studio to shoot miniature creatures, and then it's all about same techniques as filmmaking, usually like lighting, you know, using the best possible lenses to get some of this stuff. Most of it is done with macro lenses or microscopes in certain cases. But the idea with this content, and this is, I think this is key, is it's not about the actual form. It's about the content, this huge amount of photos and videos that we collected along the years. That's the treasure. And sometimes we use that in different contexts. So a museum exhibit, a book. This is actually not a commercial book. It's like a little portfolio book that we did. But we can mention the plankton book that was done with my father. This was translated in 5 languages now. This book is kind of the Bible for plankton, and you see it on the cover. It shows kind of that idea of diversity and also amazing richness in you know, shapes and colors. So the plankton world can be symbolized in this mandala that we did. And then we decline this in different contexts. So museum exhibits, interactive media, educational. But the core was this series of Plankton Chronicles, which is, you know, already 10 years old. We can't say it's
Really already
work, but we're still surfing that plankton wave because it's infinite. You don't stop. every time you look in another drop of ocean water, you're going to find other creatures that you didn't see before and that might really strike your curiosity. So we're looking to do a new shoots, new locations. It'll come.
It's not getting old. Don't worry about it.
You know, it might be getting old for certain people and boring, but not for us. That's
No,
for sure.
not for me either. I'm
we've
loving this
also,
stuff.
We've also found ways of making kind of bridges to other places. Like right now, we work a lot with scientists who are studying whales.
Okay.
And there's a really intimate relationship between whales and plankton, as you know. They're direct, you know, predatory relationship. So the whales eat the plankton. But we've also learned recently, and this is quite interesting, that whales are actually fertilizers of the oceans. When they poop, they actually fertilize the ocean and trigger plankton blooms. So this is kind of it's almost like you could say whales are gardeners of the oceans, because what they're doing in their you know, eating cycle is they're also providing those nutrients for plankton to grow. So they're growing their own food if you extrapolate a bit. So this work with whales is fascinating. Sharif and I were both in Mangan, the northern part of Quebec, last summer to film and photograph whales, not for the beauty shots, which is usually our intention, but this time it's more for science. So identifying the whales and finding if they come back, if they're the same individuals that came the previous year. And this is, again, a long-term project, several years in a row. And we use drones to actually get right over the whale and take a clear shot of the whale to get some identification elements. But that being close to those creatures is something so magical. And there's an interaction. You hear them, you feel them, you feel their presence, you feel their moods in certain cases.
Yeah, there's a true intelligence there that is tangible when you're in their presence.
Yeah, and I've been reading quite a bit about whales, and you know that this might interest you, Jason, is whales are at the origin of the environmental movements. This is in a book by David Rottenberg that's called The 1,000-Mile Song. And apparently it's the chant, how do you call it, the chant of the humpback whales that has struck a chord amongst humans to really create this ecological movement, politicized in a sense. It's because of that kind of intelligence that you can find in the singing of the whales or the communication of the whales. That's this author believes that's the origin of the environmental movement we have today. But it's interesting to see that whales and humans have such a resonance and such a relationship, you know?
Yeah. You know, you're reminding me of just watching your content over on our channel on nomadlive.tv, and it's mixed in with a bunch of things that I filmed that I felt kind of fit with Earth Day, which turned into Earth Week. Mm-hmm. And I was amazed to be reminded, well, how much you've traveled, but how you and I have been to Bouvet Island, this most remote place on the planet. And I'm watching these shots, and I know my shots from that trip so well that I knew right away they were not mine, but I knew exactly where you were. And this was not on Bouvet. It was actually in South Georgia that you had filmed this, in an old, what used to be a whale refinery, essentially, where they made oil from the whales back in the day. And this is something that's, I think, quite special between us, because so few people have been to these places, particularly on Bouvet Island. Yet here we are sharing a studio together, and we both ended up walking, I think, on what was exactly the same beach. Tell me about what does it mean to you to be nomad, and how is this affected these days with the whole quarantine situation that we all have to be living through.
Well, Bouvet was definitely an incredible experience. That was on board the ACE expedition, which, if you look at Antarctica, from underneath, we participated in an expedition that circumnavigated the continent. It was what, 2016?
16 or 17?
17.
2017.
Yeah.
And I did the leg from Chile back to South Africa. So 1 month at sea. Noé had just gotten off. He had done Australia to Chile. And we were documenting. It was a fascinating expedition. There were 22 research projects, atmospheric, oceanography, terrestrial. So it was very, very diverse, and with scientists all over the world. And yeah, the ship stopped on South Georgia and on Bouvet-Toya. It was incredible. Helicopter on the volcano because there were glaciologists who were taking ice core samples and bringing them back on the ship. It was absolutely incredible. And yeah, definitely, I think we're all three of us gigantic nomads, and that will definitely be affected, I think, in the next few years. I think it's going to come back with a vengeance. Traveling is going to come back a lot, but it's going to change very much so. And I think Yuval Harari is an interesting reference in terms of what the future is going to look like. It's the meeting of artificial intelligence and biotechnology, where our health will be monitored in extreme ways, where before boarding a plane, you're either going to have a bracelet, or on your phone, they're going to know your heart rate, your blood pressure, and people are going to trade their privacy for health. And I think that's what we're going to see in the next few years. And yeah, it's going to be monitored, even possibly before you enter public spaces. Who knows how far it's going to go, but I think that's the way it's going to go.
I'm surprised that because the COVID-19 is occupying so much of our mind space, I'm surprised how little we're talking about the positive effects that this period is having on the planet. It's I don't know the facts about it, but I have a feeling this, it's never been this good, at least not for the past at least 20, 30 years, if not more. I might be wrong about that. I really have no idea what I'm talking about, but it makes me feel almost disappointed that everyone's rushing back to this normalcy, to figure that there's a lot here that we should hold on to and keep in this new way of life. And travel is one of those things, where all of us and many people in our society have been so privileged to travel the globe, doing what we love, making movies. Very often for us, our camera has been our ticket to the world. And I think that's going to change, and for the better in a way. We're suddenly, as you're describing, Sharif, it's going to become more complicated for us to travel. So we're going to ask ourselves, about 10 times before whether it's worth it for us to take one trip or another, or whether we can do it through Zoom.
Absolutely. Right. Well, we might be involved in a project that would require shooting around the world. And an interesting way of adapting is we're trying to develop a kit, for instance, that you could send all around the world, where people would set it up easily and film themselves and put the content out there. So that's an interesting example of how video production will probably adapt in the next few years. Definitely.
Yeah. Definitely. There's a kind of how do you say, democratization of media, and I think even more so that people are confined and have to kind of communicate through a digital platform on a daily basis. It's just going to make people more, and generations to come, how they adapt so fast, and school kids who are doing their classes online and all. It's just going to make it so easy for people to kind of communicate via these platforms. I think there's a big evolution on that side. I think you're totally right on the kind of ecology. There's not many studies yet, but there are people working on studying what the impact of this slowdown is on the environment. And I think when those are published, there's going to be a lot of very good kind of inspirational decisions that can be made depending on those studies. What I'm surprised, and I'll tell you, I've been thinking about this for a few days. Why isn't there a world leader today that has taken that responsibility of saying out loud those things? Why isn't there one political leader who can tell us, let's not go back to how it was before, let's change the system in its core? I'm really surprised. No, there's none. And I think it shows that our system right now is sick and it's not going to change so easily. We need a revolution. This is a virus revolution, and I can't believe there's not one, because someone who will take that decision will be remembered forever.
You're right.
One person who doesn't have that vision of, let's do it now. We're all in this together. Let's do it now. And then if one does it, maybe it'll inspire others. It's just surprising.
Well, it is the opportunity is here indeed, and in all of anyway, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I feel there's a change already happening in my life and with Charlotte as well. Just the way we're taking those small decisions. We're just thinking a little harder than we're used to when we're buying something or when we're about to order something online. We just have that little bit more of a pause to go, can I get this locally, for example, or can I avoid taking the car now? It doesn't matter if I take an extra half hour in my day to get where I'm going, so that I can, and it's really just because I have a little more time to consider these things. And this whole pandemic is a psychological shock to every one of us too. So there's a reaction in that too that opens up to new thought and change. So I guess in closing, I should ask, what I'm really wondering is, how are you guys doing personally? How is this period affecting your lives?
Well, it's the first time I see Noe in like 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So
that's a nice break.
Keeping a social distance. Because I came back from a shoot in Cuba on March 15, which was fascinating on many levels. I mean, that country has been living in quarantine essentially also for so many years, for over 40, 50 years. So it was a very strange situation to come back from Cuba right when the shit was hitting the fan here. And I mean, personally, I can't speak on behalf of anyone. For some reason, I've been a bit like you were describing. I think I've been reading a lot and just researching so much information about the biology of viruses, about bats. I had a phase where I was, and I encourage everyone, all the nature lovers, to watch documentaries on bats, which are some of the most fascinating mammals in the world. Absolutely incredible. And things like that, where, yeah, I've had time to explore many passions. So I've been kind of happy about the situation. I've had a little bit of work from home also, which is fine. And I hope people can also take this time to exercise and walk outside. I know that it's strange sometimes to think of confinement and talk about walking, but walking is really the best medicine in the world. So I hope everyone can invest a little bit of time in their physical health and nutrition.
Yeah, for me, I have to say that the beginning of the crisis was a lot of problems, like in my mind. It was overcrowding my thoughts. It was having impact on my sleep. And I think it's also very clear that when you have children, I have a daughter, you fear so much for their future. You're like almost, kind of, and this fear that comes from media, basically, from taking all that information. And I realized after a couple of days that if we were in the countryside and we hadn't that connection with media, life would be exactly like it was before.
Huh.
So
I was
it's
thinking
really,
about that same idea. Isn't that
really
interesting?
that connection with this global connection we have that is causing a lot of the fear that we see in the world today. And I'm talking fear because now I see it as a real kind of mindset of fear that is being pushed up on us. The reason is there's been pandemics all along.
It's not the first pandemic we have since the beginning of the internet, but it's the first global pandemic. And to be all informed, as you say, you know, to be all informed by the minute about what's going on one side of the world, or as much as we can right in our own city, that's also, well, that's a big positive. You know, it's making us go to war against this virus in a very organized way. But essentially, it's the fact that we're all connected like this that we're able to turn this around in a relatively short amount of time, as opposed to, you know, the Black Plague or something like this.
But we're very lucky, I think, in Quebec. We've been really, I mean, the information system is good, and we're getting a lot of positive information. You know, that it's kind of open. They're not censoring the data. I don't think so. Anyways, I think it's good.
Yeah.
And the evolution is that after a few days or a few weeks, I really felt like I had more time to do things and to like pause. And it's true that this slow living movement has is going to help us, is going to help a lot of people kind of get out of that crazy rhythm that, you know, they were pushed in by our society. Reading, riding bikes every single day with my daughter, that's like the pleasures that I can discover. Or taking time to create something that takes several days and that's unpaid and that's just like pure pleasure. I think those are the really good sides. You know, maybe growing vegetables. There's all kinds of things that we can think of. I see a lot of making bread right now, which is really nice. It's like going back to some essentials and food. Great positive things too. I think it's just the general fear that it has pushed on humanity. Why aren't we using that for saving the planet as well? You know, we should be using that energy, transform the fear into positive actions. That's the next step, I think.
I think one of the interesting takeaways from the situation is that, as mentioned, in the history of humankind, there's been so many pandemics. And again, I've watched a lot of documentaries on that, which has been very enriching. And one of the biggest takeaways for me is that, as storytellers also, is it is one thing to read about something and study, and it's another thing to experience it.
Yeah.
And everybody knew about grippe espagnole, MERS, SARS, the Black Plague, smallpox, polio, you name the viruses and diseases. We read about it, we know about it, but it is so different to experience it. And yeah, that's I think one of the big takeaways for me personally, to live this.
Thank you so much for the amazing videos that you've shared with us. It's really such a wealth of content to travel the world with you through your cameras, and I love you both. Thank you again for your time today and your amazing thoughts.
Love you, Jay.
Love you, Jason. Thank you very much for having us.
See you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye, nomads. And yeah, we are nomads for sure.
Of course you are. We're all nomads. Ciao, brothers.
Night.
So there you have it. That was Noé Sardet and Sharif Mirshak of dear friends of Parafilms here in Montreal. And yeah, you can see their amazing content on our Slow TV, on nomadlive.tv. So yeah, stay with us, relax, take your time. There's no rush. We're not going anywhere. Enjoy life. Be good.